I've handled land disputes, inheritance tantrums, and enough family drama to convince me most people should write wills in thick permanent ink. But every once in a while, a case walks into my courtroom that feels less like a legal matter and more like a buried time bomb, finally deciding to go off. That's exactly what happened the morning the Greer siblings walked in. Thomas, the older brother, stiff as an oak post, and Leela, the younger sister, trembling but determined. And at the center of everything was their late father's farm, 100 acres of rich soil that had fed their family for generations. I remember sitting there, listening to opening statements, thinking this wouldn't be anything more than a simple inheritance dispute. But the moment Thomas stared at his sister with that cold, deadpan glare, I knew this was no ordinary split the property case. Family land doesn't just grow crops, it grows grudges. Their father, Samuel Greer, had passed away quietly in his sleep. No will was found, no written instructions, just a lifetime of promises made over dinner tables and tractor rides. Lila claimed her father always intended to divide the farm evenly. Thomas insisted he was the only rightful heir because he had worked the land for years while Leela left for the city. Both of them were certain they were telling the truth, and both were hiding something. When I asked Thomas why he believed he should inherit everything, he sat forward, elbows on the table. Judge, I was there. Every day. I kept the place alive when everyone else gave up. My sister didn't even come home for holidays. Lila shot back, voice cracking but steadying with each word. He's lying. Daddy never said he'd leave the whole farm to him. And the reason I didn't come home is because Thomas made sure I wasn't welcome. I watched them argue, each word like a shovel digging deeper into old wounds. That's when I noticed something. Every time Leela spoke about the land, she looked sad. Every time Thomas spoke about it, he looked scared. Fear usually means there's a secret. I asked for testimony from a neighbor, an older man named Vernon Pike, who'd lived next door to the Greers for 50 years. He shuffled up, hat in hand, and cleared his throat. Judge, I'm not sure what this is all worth, but Samuel told me once that the land wasn't supposed to stay whole. Thomas stiffened, but Vernon continued. He said he made a promise to someone, said he owed a debt that had to be honored. Now that put the courtroom in a chokehold. Neither sibling seemed to know what Vernon was talking about, and that told me only one thing. Their father had secrets neither of them was prepared for. I ordered a pause in proceedings and sent both attorneys to dig through county records for any unusual filings. I've learned that paper trails rarely lie, and sure enough, by the next morning, we had a surprise. 20 acres of that farm had once belonged to Samuel's brother, who had died young. Samuel had taken over the land but had never legally sorted out the ownership. There was an old agreement and signed but documented that said the land should one day pass to the next generation equally. So, not only did Samuel owe his brother's estate those 20 acres, but the remaining 80 had no legal heir stronger than the next. When I presented the documents, Thomas's entire posture collapsed. Lila just stared at him, confused. That's when he finally broke. He admitted he'd found an old letter in their father's desk months before his death. In it, Samuel talked about splitting the land but feared the siblings would fight. He asked Thomas to keep the peace. Instead, Thomas burned the letter, thinking he could claim everything if nothing was written down. Lila's hand flew to her mouth. Vernon shook his head. Well, I've seen a lot. But deliberate deception is still a sight that disappoints me every time. I took a breath and made my ruling. The land would be divided by law. The 20 acres belonging to the uncle's estate would be reassigned equally to both children, and the remaining 80 would be split right down the middle. Thomas would face penalties for concealing evidence, and I ensured Leela's name was placed on all official property documents immediately. When the gavel came down, the siblings didn't look at each other. Some cases end with relief, some end with reconciliation. This one ended with reality. You can fix land records, but you can't farm trust from soil that's been poisoned for years. As they walked out of my courtroom, I couldn't help thinking that inheritance isn't about property. It's about the truth families leave behind and the lies they hope never surface. I watched the Greer siblings walk out, but something told me the story wasn't done with me yet. Cases involving land, especially family land, have a way of echoing long after the gavel hits. And sure enough, 2 days later, my clerk informed me that both Thomas and Leela had filed emergency motions. Apparently, dividing the land didn't settle anything. It stirred up everything their father had buried. The hearing was set for the following morning. When they came in, the tension in the room felt heavier than wet soil. Thomas looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept since the ruling. Leela, on the other hand, looked almost determined, not angry, just resolute, like someone finally tired of running. I opened the session, leaned forward, and said, "All right, let's hear what new mess I'm supposed to mop up today." Lila stood first. She held a small wooden box with a tarnished latch. "Judge, this was delivered to my house last night. No return address. But it's my father's handwriting that got Thomas's full attention." She brought the box to my bench. Inside was a folded envelope, yellowed with age. The name on the front read, "For my children, when the time comes." Inside the envelope was a letter written in shaky pen strokes. Samuel Greer had apparently written it months before his death but never mailed or delivered it. Maybe he was afraid, or maybe he hoped the kids would never need it. The letter explained everything he wrote about the promise to his late brother, the guilt of not transferring the land earlier, and the fear that his own children would fall apart fighting over something that was meant to bring them together. He mentioned Leela leaving home not because she didn't care, but because she and Thomas fought constantly, and she felt staying would destroy her. He mentioned Thomas's dedication as final wish, that they share the land, manage it together, because the soil belongs to the family, not. But the legal question remained. Why was this letter sent now, and who sent it? Before I could ask, a small cough sounded from the back. Vernon Pike stood up again, hat in hand, eyes lowered. "Judge, I'm the one who sent it." You could have heard a pin drop. He explained that Samuel had given him the box years ago, joking that Vernon would outlive him, and therefore act as the backup plan. He'd told Vernon to deliver it only when the kids were fighting over the land in a way that no court could settle. Vernon said, "I didn't want to meddle, but after what I saw the other day, it felt like time." Thomas shot him a wounded look. "Why didn't my father just give it to us himself?" Vernon sighed, "Because he was afraid you'd stop listening to each other the moment you smelled a dispute. He wanted you to figure something out on your own first." I've been in a courtroom for decades, but even I'm not immune to the sting of a father's regrets laid bare. I took a breath, letting the silence do some of the work. Then I straightened my glasses and said, "All right, here's what happens next." The letter wasn't a legal will, but it was a written expression of intent. In most inheritance cases, intent is a guiding force when no formal will exists. However, courts don't force siblings to run a farm together. I wasn't about to chain two people to a fence line out of sentiment. What I could do was this: honor the equal division, but introduce an easement agreement allowing shared access to the irrigation lines, barns, and roadways that crossed both properties. The farm would function as a whole, but ownership remained divided. They could work it together or separately, but neither could cut the other off. It was the closest thing to honoring their father without trapping them in each other's shadow. Thomas objected. Of course he did. He didn't like the idea of being legally tied to Lila in any capacity. But when Lila quietly said, "I'm willing to learn the work, if you'll give me a chance," he went still. For a moment, I saw something crack in him, maybe guilt, maybe old protectiveness, maybe just fatigue from years of resentment. G knew. I stared at that brown door a few extra seconds, letting the weight of what it represented settle in my chest. A door shouldn't make your pulse spike, but this one did, because on the other side of it was the truth, raw, unpleasant, and likely to leave burn marks on everyone involved. But I've never been the type to turn around just because the air got a little colder. So I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of damp paper and old wood, like secrets had been fermenting here for years. I walked deeper until the door clicked shut behind me, and somehow that sound echoed like a gavel hitting a bench. In that instant, I felt this case wasn't finished with me, not by a long shot. If anything, it was just sharpening its teeth. I moved toward the lone metal desk in the center of the room. Someone had been using this place recently. Dust doesn't lie. And the smear marks told me something, or someone had been rifling through the stacks less than a day ago. I sifted through a few files, and sure enough, the threads were all here. Financial statements, phone logs, photos, the kind of photos that make your stomach tighten because they show people not where they should be, with expressions that don't match their surroundings. And right on top of the pile, almost mocking me, was the picture of the couple, eyes wide, fear barely concealed, yet still holding on to each other like they were their own lifeline. That kind of bond is what criminals try to weaponize, but they underestimate it every time. When two people care that deeply, they don't break. They bend, they fight, they claw. As I studied the photo, A faint vibration hummed from the right pocket of my coat. My phone, I answered, half expecting the call to be another problem wrapped in a riddle. Judge, Detective Moran said, voice low. We found movement on the highway cameras. A vehicle matching the description just crossed the old county line. Could be our path. But there's a catch. Of course there was. There's always a catch. What is it? I asked. The plate's fake, and there's someone riding in the passenger seat we can't identify. Doesn't match our couple. I felt the tension ripple under my skin. Whoever that extra person was, they either knew something, threatened something, or intended to do something worse. And I couldn't stand the idea of this case stretching its shadow farther. Send me the footage, I said. I'll look at it myself. Seconds later, a grainy snapshot appeared on my screen. Low resolution, bad angle, but clear enough to make out the outline of the stranger's silhouette. Something about the posture felt wrong, too relaxed for someone supposedly participating in a kidnapping. Or maybe, too confident. Confidence is dangerous in the wrong hands. I walked to the back of the room, where a narrow window overlooked the alley. Sometimes a view helps me think, even if the view is nothing but cracked pavement. If the stranger wasn't a kidnapper, then maybe they were a handler, someone making sure the operation went smoothly, someone higher up the ladder, the kind of person who didn't panic, the kind who expected this to unfold cleanly. They didn't anticipate me stepping in. A soft creak interrupted my thoughts, the unmistakable sound of the brown door, shifting, slowly, cautiously. Turned. Someone was standing in the doorway, a figure half lit, face shadowed, body still as stone. I couldn't read their expression, but I didn't need to. You can sense hostility before you see it, and this presence carried that cold, metallic stillness of someone prepared for confrontation. You're not supposed to be here, the voice said, controlled, laced with something sharp. I lifted my chin. I go wherever the truth takes me. You bargained for. The figure moved another step inside the room, and I could finally make out the faint outlines of their face, a jaw held too tight, eyes that didn't blink enough. Someone who had practiced intimidation the way others practice breathing. But intimidation only works if you allow it. And I've spent decades staring down people who thought they could outwit, outtalk, or outmaneuver me. I didn't flinch. I just watched. You've been digging through things that don't belong to you, the stranger said. That's a problem. Only for people who have something to hide, I replied. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of their mouth, the kind that usually comes before someone makes a mistake. They lowered their hand toward their coat pocket. Subtle, but not subtle enough. If you're reaching for a weapon, I said, you should know I've testified in more firearms cases than you've had decent nights of sleep, so don't. My voice stayed calm, the way it does when I'm seconds from lowering the hammer. The stranger froze, hand hovering just shy of the pocket. You're a judge, they said, almost bemused. Not a cop. I'm a lot of things when the situation requires it. The room tensed between us, a quiet pressure settling like dust before a storm. I took one step forward, deliberately, forcing the stranger to recalibrate their threat. I know about the couple, I continued. I know they were moved. I know someone else is involved, maybe someone close to you, and I know you wouldn't be here unless you were trying to clean up a mess. The stranger's jaw flickered barely, but enough. A nerve hit. Whatever you think you know, they said, their voice dropping lower. Stop. Walk out that door. Forget this room. Forget what you saw. Not an option. They exhaled sharply, stepping back just enough to tilt their head, as if weighing whether I was worth the trouble. Then something shifted in their expression, not fear, not anger, resignation. You don't understand what you're walking into, they said. This isn't just a kidnapping. It's a transaction. Those kids weren't taken, they were delivered. Someone paid, someone powerful, and if you keep pushing, you'll get in the way of people who don't appreciate interference. I felt a cold spike move down my spine, but I didn't let it show. You just told me everything I needed to know, I said quietly. Their eyes hardened instantly. I didn't tell you anything. You told me enough. Enough to know you're involved. Enough to know there's a buyer. Enough to know the kids are still alive. Silence. Then a faint tremor, crack in their carefully constructed confidence. I pressed on. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to step aside. I'm going to walk out of this room. And you're going to pray that whoever you work for is more forgiving than I am. For a long second, neither of us moved. Then, the stranger stepped back. It wasn't surrender. It was calculation, a temporary retreat. You won't make it far, they murmured. I've already made it too far for your comfort. I walked past them, my hand steady, my breath controlled. Their eyes followed me like a sniper's sight, but they didn't try to stop me. Maybe they knew better. Maybe they were waiting for someone else to do the dirty work. As I reached the brown door, I paused, looking back at them one last time. "Tell your buyer," I said. Their clock just started ticking, and with that, I stepped out, letting the door shut behind me, not with fear, but with purpose. I had a trail now, faint but real, and once I have a trail, I follow it until the truth comes screaming into the light. I walked down the dim hallway, the echo of my footsteps steady and deliberate. Fear is a choice, and I don't choose it. Not when lives are on the line. Not when someone thinks they can intimidate me into silence. The brown door thudded shut behind me, sealing the stranger inside that cramped room, but I knew better than to believe the situation was contained. People like that don't stay still. They slither, they reposition, they wait for angles, so I moved quickly. The exit at the end of the hall opened into the alley behind the building, where sunlight cut through the shadows like a blade. I let the warmth hit my face for a moment, not relief, just recalibration. I've learned that after staring down danger, your pulse needs a second to understand you survived. But as soon as I stepped forward, my phone buzzed again. It was Detective Moran. "Judge, we've got a problem," he said without preamble. "The vehicle we tracked, it switched roads. Someone anticipated we were watching." "They were tipped off," I said. "By who?" "By someone standing 10 feet from me a few minutes ago." He swore under his breath. "Where are you now?" "I'm sending units." "No," I said. "Units will scare them underground. I need movement, not panic." "Judge, I'm not asking." "Detective, I'm telling you, keep surveillance quiet, but widen the perimeter east. They won't go west again. They think we're chasing the wrong direction." He exhaled slowly, the kind of exhale that comes from trusting me against his better judgment. "All right, but keep your phone on, and don't go anywhere alone." I hung up and turned right, toward the street, but halfway down the alley, something caught my eye. Tire marks, fresh, deep, cutting across the grime. A large vehicle had stopped here recently and fast. I crouched down, tracing to parallel grooves with my fingers. Someone had been watching the building. Someone had been waiting for me to come out. And they had only left minutes ago. I followed the tracks to the main road, where the marks vanished into the normal hum of traffic. But the timing, the precision, it all clicked. The stranger wasn't working alone. Someone outside was ready to step in if the confrontation went sideways. A handler for the handler. This wasn't a one-person operation. It was layered, professional, structured. I looked across the street, scanning the faces, the parked cars, the windows above storefronts. People underestimate what you can see if you're willing to stare long enough. And then I saw it, a glint. Not sunlight, reflection. From a windshield 3 rows down. A car that didn't match the others. To clean, to still, the kind of stillness that means someone is inside but trying not to be. Notice. I started walking toward it. Controlled, as if I were crossing the street for coffee. The windshield shifted, someone adjusting slightly, trying to keep a view of me without being obvious. Too late. I walked right up to the passenger window and tapped twice with my knuckle. The figure inside jolted, a man in a dark cap. He quickly turned his face away, but I saw enough. Recognition hit me like a jolt. He wasn't a stranger. He was the man from the highway. Camera footage. The unidentified passenger. He'd been following me. He started the engine. I stepped back, bracing myself. He peeled out of the parking spot, tires screeching, but not before rolling down the window, just enough for me to hear him shout, "Stop searching, you won't find them alive if you keep going." And then, he sped off. The threat wasn't just a warning, it was a promise, but I've never backed down from promises made by cowards. I pulled out my phone, dialing Moran again. "Detective," I said, voice steady, "we just escalated from a kidnapping to a countdown." The moment the words left my mouth, I heard Moran's chair scrape across the floor on his end of the line. "A countdown," he repeated. "Judge, what happened?" The unidentified passenger was parked across the street watching me. He drove off. He said if we keep searching, we won't find the kids alive. Moran muttered another curse. The kind you only hear from someone who's been on the job too long and still hasn't become numb to threats like that. "We'll get units after him. You won't catch him," I said. "He's trained, calm under pressure. Someone who thinks 3 moves ahead. But he made one mistake." "What mistake?" "He thinks threats work on me." I hung up before he could argue. I didn't need a lecture about danger or protocol. I needed information, and I knew exactly where to get it. I walked toward the edge of town, toward a small diner with a flickering open sign and brick walls stained with decades of rain. It was the kind of place where secrets simmered under the smell of burnt coffee. Inside, the bell above the door jingled. A few locals looked up, recognized me, then quickly pretended they hadn't. I took a seat at the counter, and within seconds the waitress, a woman named Patty, with sharp eyes and an even sharper memory, came over with a mug. "You look like someone kicked your dog," she said. "I don't own a dog," I replied. "Exactly." She poured the coffee. "So what's wrong?" "You see a black sedan parked outside earlier?" I asked casually, though my voice never quite manages casual. "Tinted windows, driver sitting low." Her hand froze, just for a fraction of a second, but enough. "I see a lot of cars, Judge, not ones that idle long enough to drain half a tank," I said. Patty set the coffee pot down and leaned in. "He was here about 10 minutes, didn't get out, didn't blink from what I could see. I almost called it in because he gave me a bad feeling." "Did he meet with anyone?" "No. But someone approached the car." My pulse ticked once. Hard. "Who?" She tilted her head toward a booth in the corner. A man sat there alone, hood up, wiping his hands on a napkin like he couldn't quite scrub away whatever he'd touched. I recognized him instantly, not because I'd seen him before, but because people like him show up in every case with too many shadows. Middleman. Messenger. A person who doesn't make decisions, just carries them. "Thanks," I whispered. I walked toward the booth, each step quiet but intentional. The man stiffened as I approached, his shoulders tightening beneath the fabric of his hoodie. He didn't look up until I was standing right at his table. "You had a busy morning," I said. His eyes snapped to mine, nervous, calculating, then cornered. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't insult me," I said. "You talked to the man in the sedan. You delivered something, or he delivered something to you. Either way, you're involved." He swallowed, the movement jerky. I can't talk about it." "You can," I corrected, "and you will, because right now, 2 kids' lives depend on someone finally being honest." His hand twitched toward the backpack at his side. I didn't wait. I reached over and placed my palm flat on the table. "Steady, immovable." "Don't," I said. He froze, then slowly, with shaking fingers, he unzipped the backpack and slid a phone across the table toward me. A phone smeared with dirt. A phone I recognized from the photo, the boyfriend's phone. My breath caught, not fear, not shock, something sharper, he said. The man whispered, voice cracking, "If this phone ever reached you." The countdown had already started. I picked up the phone, feeling its weight like a verdict. "Tell me everything," I said. And the man finally broke.